how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you. Talk to me about your journey with that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I'm so glad that it's more openly being talked about. I feel like, the word self-care wasn't even a thing maybe a couple of years ago, but I feel like now it's much more open. It's a discussion. It's something we all need. And I think something we're finally prioritizing. When it comes to self-care for myself, a couple of things that I do, I talk about building in breaks on my show. So building in breaks is key. I'm going to share a little bit more about that. And journaling. Journaling is so huge for me. And if you're a journaler, if you're a journaler, you understand this. If you're new to journaling or you haven't tried it, you might not get that, but building in breaks is huge. And just, finding time to have your self-care, whatever that looks like, is just making sure you have the time built into your schedule. But going back to the whole built-in break thing, one of the things I've learned about myself is I need a lot of downtime. And I need a lot of time to recharge. I consider myself like an extroverted introvert. So I'm very, very social, but I also need a lot of downtime to kind of recharge my batteries. So what I call building in breaks is kind of when things are busy. A lot of times we prioritize the things that we're doing, the errands and the little stuff that have to get done. Maybe it's not even little, but we tend to take a break when we get through all the stuff that we have to get done. So the stuff becomes a priority, and our mental well-being, our emotional health is kind of on the back burner because we have to get the stuff done first. So for me, what I now do is building in breaks, and it could just be an afternoon. It could be a weekend away. It could be a day off. But by doing that, I kind of schedule in the time amongst all the stuff that has to get done. And I've found that by doing that, it's, I become the priority. My mental well-being becomes a priority and not the stuff. So the stuff will get done, but sometimes it's scheduling it. And it's kind of like, thinking about like a doctor's appointment or, anything else that you would prioritize. You put it on your calendar and nothing is going to interfere with that appointment. It's the same thing for me, that built-in break, whether it is the afternoon, whether it is a weekend, my family knows it's coming. It's like, hey, this is my time, whether I'm doing it solo, whether I'm going away with someone. But it's, to me, building in the break is so key to, sanity and really that self-care that you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you talk about too, the stuff, because I've talked about this a lot on the show, put it in your calendar or it won't get done. And we consider the stuff the priority. So that list that we make every day of whatever it is we need to do for our job, for the daily errands, for our chores, for our partner, for, if you have kids, and we don't. And so we get all those things done. And then by then time we're done with that, a lot of times we're wore out and we built in no time to refresh our cup, build up our cup again. But I love how you made the difference of like, if we're making the stuff a priority, we better make ourselves a priority. So we've got the gas to do the stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. That's really what self-care is kind of recharging your own batteries. And I think too, the term self-care is starting to become a little bit loosely used. And I think sometimes people feel that, your self-care is getting your nails done and getting your hair done. And those are important things, especially if they make you feel good, but that also might just be part of your upkeep. You might need more than that, like that might just be part of what you do. And, if you think about, getting your hair done, I have to color my hair often because I'm getting older, but, if I sit in a salon, on a Saturday for 3 or 4 hours, I mean, there's sometimes that might be a nice break, but also there's other things I'd like to do on a Saturday for 3 or 4 hours. So is that really self-care when I'm sitting in a salon chair? Yeah. I guess that's up for debate, but
I like the upkeep versus self-care, because I feel like self-care has gotten a little saturated, and that's over the last few years, which at least is being talked about, because it wasn't even talked about, 10 years ago.
I agree.
So it just went a little the other way. And I think it's a good reminder of what it is actually caring for yourself actually is. It's meeting your basic needs. And it starts with making sure you're eating during the day, because when people get busy, they forget to eat. It's crazy. It's wild. Sure. But you keep putting it on the back burner. Drinking enough water, moving your body, giving yourself some quiet time, doing some breathing, the journaling piece is such an important way to kind of maybe unload some thoughts or process some things. I mean, journaling can be a lot of different things for people. And so I love the, but it's that I love the upkeep versus the self-care. And that's a good question to ask yourself. Is this upkeep? Is this like maintenance? Or is this truly self-care? So thank you for that. I like that a lot. Within all this, confidently setting boundaries, you mentioned that you put breaks in there, which naturally probably leads up to the fact that you've set some boundaries around that time. When did you get here? Like, you built in these practices. How did you get to that point? Was there a turning point, or is this something that you've been naturally geared towards? Talk to me about that.
That's a great question. I think, as I'm getting older, my priorities have shifted. So, what seemed, I used to love being out. Now I'm turning into a homebody and just kind of noticing these transitions. So I'll just kind of put it out there. I turned 40 almost a year ago now. And I really noticed a huge transition around that time, kind of my late 30s, of just, needing more peace and quiet and all that good stuff. And so I had to put those boundaries in place because I noticed that I need more of that downtime. I need more rest than I used to. I need more of what, before I could run off of maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but I can't do that anymore. So for me, it was a lot of, realizing what's important, but I was navigating a new relationship. So, and that came, so I'll also put out there that I have no children on my own, but I am a stepmom. And so with that comes a whole different, bag of a situation. It's very different. And now I have, kids that are coming in and out of the home. My partner and I, we live together. We live in a new home. So we're adjusting to each other. He loves to have the TV on. I don't, so it's a lot of, kind of like learning to live with other people. And so I think the boundary thing kind of came about, not only just within my relationship, but even my friendships. I've noticed a lot. I was really tolerating a lot of, I think, unhealthy friendships where I gave people a little bit too much grace. And I noticed that they would kind of show disrespect to me or not support me and things like that. And so I kind of noticed that I had a few friendships that were like that. And, I was kind of still entertaining those relationships because maybe I knew them for a long time or because we went way back, or, maybe we had things in common. But after a while, I noticed that I really shouldn't be friends with these people because they weren't showing me the same level of respect. So boundaries just kind of had to come in play there. And it wasn't anything that I naturally vocalized. It was just making sure that I respected my own boundaries. Cause I think that, it's one thing to say what your boundaries are, and it is really another to enforce them. Enforcing the boundary, I think, is the harder part than coming up with what the boundary is.
We can come up with all kinds of ideas of what sounds great. But then we got to communicate it, or even make those subtle shifts. It doesn't always have to be that big grand. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always have to be that big conversation. Sometimes it's just a subtle shift on, I'm going to get more sleep tonight. I'm going to set my alarm for this. I'm going to mark this day out as mine. I'm going to take this afternoon, It can be all of those things, but also I love you talk about relationships because we've talked about this several times, but it's always a good reminder for women that all relationships are not always meant to be for forever. And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. They had their time. They have their season. It doesn't make anyone else inherently bad or good. Sometimes we feel like if we're going to stop something or discontinue something or even ease out of something or back off the level of involvement or communication, that somebody has to be the villain. And that just,
that's right.
And no one has to be the villain. We shift and we change. And that's no longer meeting our needs. It's no longer meeting us where we are. And that's okay. And that is so I think it's a good reminder that way too. And then when we communicate that, listen, this isn't about blame or bad or good. I've just had these shifts. And, so I think that can change a lot. Take the fear out of communicating too. When we take that, somebody has to be a bad guy situation.
Yeah. And I think too, and I think, it reminds me of that. the word toxic gets used a lot too, where, it's not necessarily a toxic friendship. I mean, you have people that as you get older in life, your likes change, your priorities change, and, life moves you in different directions, whether it's with your career, with your family. I mean, things just happen, it's just going to change. So it's not that they were toxic to me or I was toxic to them, but I did see a lot of infringing on the boundaries. And that's where it was like, okay, let me put something in place here. But, I think sometimes too, we think that somebody has to be toxic to end the friendship. And it's like, no, but sometimes like, I'll give a great example where I had a good friend of mine. She was going through a lot of difficult stuff and we were very close, but she'd been going down a very unhealthy path for some time. I was giving a lot of my time and energy to kind of help her through that. And, my boyfriend and I, we got engaged. Okay, great. And one of the first things she said to me was, and I had been engaged prior, never married, but engaged prior many years ago. And what she said to me was, I liked your other fiance better. And I thought, oh, well, that's kind of rude,
Right.
But there were several things, like she didn't come to my mom's funeral. And I thought, wow. You're a good friend of mine. I'm showing up for you, but you're not showing up for me.
Right.
So it was kind of like the last straw was, yeah, I like that other guy you dated better. And it's like, well, okay, but he's not in the picture anymore. So that was one where it was just kind of a, maybe we need to part ways for a little bit and maybe we'll come back together, but maybe we won't. So that's where the boundary is important.
And that's a great example. She's in a hard season, and sometimes hard seasons, bring out the best and most difficult and worst and all those things as she gets to a path of hopefully healing. But sometimes we feel obligated, I think, to stay. We got to take care of them, or we got to show, and you can show up for a while, but you can't make people change. And it's not okay for their unhealthiness to dump over into you where it's infringing upon what's good for you and your care.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
That was a great example. Thank you for that, for sharing that. That's, I think that we run into those all the time, and we need to talk about it and what it means and how we deal with those things in an honoring, healthy way, and I think that's where we get caught up. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. Talk to me about your journey with that, any connections you may have seen, if that's something you've seen, just share a little bit about that with us.
Sure. That is such a great question. And again, I'm so glad that this is becoming more of an open discussion, because I think we never really would talk about this before. But for me, it's really been journaling. I mean, I'm so passionate about journaling for so many reasons. But what I noticed was, having navigated a new relationship, I had, had a death in the family. We had COVID, I had changed jobs. I actually talked about this on my podcast, but I'd gone through a lot of change and I didn't like how I was showing up. And kind of my own patterns were to pick up the phone and call a friend and kind of just vent to them and just, here's all the stuff that's going on. And
emotionally dump. I'm in
emotional dump.
A professional emotional dumper in my former pre-therapy life.
Yes. No, I'm right there with you because, and yes, your friends are there to support you, but I realized that it wasn't my friend's job to help me work through my own stuff. That's on me. And so, I kind of noticed different patterns. One, if something happened later in the day, well, obviously I was trying to not phone a friend late at night because maybe they're at home with their families and they have kids or they're having dinner. It's their downtime. So I always kind of felt like the nighttime was a little bit kind of off limits. I could get in the car and go for a drive, but if it's snowing out or the roads are bad or whatever, that might not work. And then, even if you just want to go to the store, you want to walk around Target for a couple hours and decompress. I mean, how much can you do that? And also your wallet at some point is going to tell you to knock it off because you're going to spend all your money at Target, So I realized that I needed a healthier outlet. And yes, I will admit too, pouring a glass of wine and thinking this is going to be great and tomorrow's a better day. But again, you pour yourself a glass of wine, you're not getting in the car to drive to Target. So it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm trapped. If I have this issue, how do I get through this? So I heard another very, I wouldn't say well-known, but influencer podcaster. And she always talked about journaling. And even as a kid, I was never a Dear Diary writer. I wasn't into kind of that scene. Like I kind of thought it was a little bit weird to write your feelings out on paper. So for me, it's like a bizarre concept. But I realized that I'm like, I need some kind of outlet. And so, listening to this other podcaster, she clearly had, she was onto something. So I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to try. So I tried it, grabbed myself a notebook, something that was lying around my house that, had a few blank pages in it. And I was just kind of surprised at all the things I wrote about. And then I started to find that just everything just kind of flowed right out. So, and then it just became one of those things where it's now just part of my self-care. I mean, I don't ever journal because I feel like I have to. I journal because I want to. Yeah. And it's so therapeutic. I mean, for anybody who's listening, if you're not a journaler, I just encourage you, if you need an outlet. To me, I don't have a therapist, but therapy is amazing. But to me, my therapist is a journal, because I can, I can daydream, I can work through things I'm trying to process and vent. I mean, there's so much you can do in a journal. I mean, anything you want. If you're trying to do a passion project, you want to start a podcast, whatever it might be, write out your ideas. It's such a great place. But emotionally, there's something that happens when you connect your brain with your hands so that the thoughts and then the words, meet the paper. There's something about that kind of process that really helps you clarify all that you're experiencing. And for me, that was just much better, outlet to handle, whatever it was that I was going through.
Yeah. And when you put it all out in front of you, I do a practice every day. And you and I have talked about this before. And if I skip a day, I notice it. And yesterday was a day I skipped a day. I had some deadlines with our upcoming radio show and I was feeling a little frantic, and it was Sunday. And so I usually take the afternoon off on Sunday. It's usually a no contact day for me. And so I took the morning off, but I just watched some Christmas movies, but I didn't take that time to journal. I didn't take that time. And I was in high anxiety mode by 6:30 last night because I didn't take the time to put it out on paper. I didn't give myself that space I needed. And so I noticed, my body was telling me, I was getting clues throughout the day that I needed to stop and do, different things. It wasn't just there were some other things too. And I just kept pushing. I'm like, Melissa, you know better than this. And, so I really sat with myself last night and I didn't beat myself up. I grabbed the journal. I did it. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned, talked about it this morning. But I normally on a day where I'm listening and paying attention, I write down all the emotions I'm feeling every day. And that helps me when you put that on there. Oh, that's why I'm having this sense here. That's why I'm feeling anxious here. That's what I'm excited about here. It also reminds me that I am nuanced and I can feel multiple things at one time. I can be equal parts sad, excited, hopeful, and thankful, all in the same compass of space. It also, those ideas things, when you're those new, it just helps you kind of put a lens on it. Also for me, I don't know, it helps inform me, okay, this is how I'm showing up today. So therefore, this is what my bandwidth is based on that. I need these things, or this is my bandwidth. It might be really energetic. It might be a little lower than I was hoping for. So what do I need to adjust within that? Would you say that's helped you as well? Or if it's looked different?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, I know some people don't even ever go back and reread their journals, but I do. It's actually a fun little thing I do because I have so many, I think this year I was just posting this on the Piece of Me podcast Instagram page, but I had a picture of 6 journals stacked on top of each other. And those were just the last 2 years, just how full they were because I do it all the time. And again, I don't force myself, but it's so beneficial. I think it's fun to just, if you think about, especially as we're, you and I are recording this at the end of 2023, it's always a good time to look back and kind of realize the hard things that you've been through and to realize the things you've accomplished. And, it's, but it's also kind of fun to wonder, what was I doing in December of 2022? Was I still dealing with this certain situation? Was I still feeling this way about that thing? Was I still going through X, Y, or Z? Did I still want to do whatever passion project? And for me, I love to look back and just kind of look through the archives, and just see, is there, because to me, and I share this on my show that I call it pattern popping. And I call it pattern popping because there's certain patterns that pop up within our journals that are kind of, they could be triggers, traumas, or passions. But if you find yourself always writing about certain things here and there, there's a reason. There's something behind that, and it's calling your name because either it's a passion that, needs to come to light. It could be a trauma that needs healing, or it could be a trigger that you need to work through so it doesn't consume you. But, for me, it's the journaling it's so therapeutic. It has helped me tremendously in my own growth and my own self-development, but it's been huge. So for anyone out there, if you're, if you want to get into, I highly recommend it, especially as we look to a new year, and I know for you and I have talked about, not having to create all these new resolutions, but if self-care is a priority for you, this is a great way to start.
Yeah. I love pattern popping. That's a really good one. Look for those themes, things that consistently, come up. I love that. And I love that year reflection. I think back to a year ago today, there's so many things. There's a few things I saw coming in 2023 and so many things, good and bad, that I had no clue were coming. And so it's so interesting to see where my mind was and what I thought was coming versus what actually unfolded. It's pretty remarkable. And then
absolutely.
And you get to see your growth too, and how you've changed and evolved. And it kind of is a good, okay, what things need to be adjusted, in your self-care and your boundaries, whatever it is. Who am I today? Do those things I'm doing now match up? Because you said something earlier, journaling isn't something you have to do. It's something you want to do. That's a really good, and anything you're applying to taking care of yourself. Some things we have to do, and that we just don't want to do. We have to make, we have to eat. And for me, I love eating, but I don't love the making the meal process, but it's necessary if I'm going to eat. My daughter always jokingly says, Mom, if you ever win the lottery, you need to hire a cook because you just don't like doing this. I'm like, you're right. And your dad is so busy with his job right now. He loves to cook, but if I waited for him to be home, I'd starve. So yeah, but it's also but if those things are feeling, they're supposed to be a self-care regimen and they're not feeling filling. They're feeling like something you have to do and you've been doing them for a while and they used to be fulfilling for you. It might be time to look at the shift. And don't mistake that for you trying to establish some new patterns and getting used to it. I'm talking about those things that have consistently been with you. It might be time to try something new. And don't be afraid of that. Journal about it. Write it down.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So prioritize yourself. And journaling is one of the best ways to do that.
How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically? I would argue that you and I, and Michelle Folan and I, my friend from Asking for a Friend podcast, said this to me last week when we were talking. And I asked her this question. She's like, we're doing it right now. We're having these conversations. We're showing up for each other. We're supporting each other's work. We're lifting each other up. So talk to me about your journey with that, because I feel like that's a place I've gotten to over the last, that's always been a passion point of mine, but I feel like I'm actively doing it in a more meaningful, intentional way. Was that some of your reasoning for starting Piece of Me podcast, or just talk to me about that unapologetic piece and your experience with that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think to answer the first part about, supporting other women, I think that, and I can't speak for all women, but I do feel that women are naturally a bit competitive. And I think that we're doers and we get things done and we can handle a lot. We can balance a lot. So I feel that sometimes we wind up competing with other women because for whatever reason, whether it's in our careers or in relationships or family life, it's, that we have it all together and, we're doing better than somebody else. But I think as you get older, I've always heard that as you get older, you care a little bit less about what other people think. And I do think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. And it does come with maturity and time. But I think that when you also realize that it's not a competition, but that there's enough for everybody. Yeah. If you want, even like you and I doing this right now, we both have our own podcast. If my listeners want to come and enjoy your podcast, that would be great because we think like-minded and we're just here to support them in any way that we can. It's not that, I only want, my listeners on my show and your listeners on. No, if anything, hey, we're here to support everybody. So if the more content we can provide to help people, that's a great thing. That's a win for everybody. Right. if it's social media and people are, if it's all, everything is numbers now. Everything is how many steps did you get? How many calories have you had? How many likes do you have? How many followers do you have? And everything is, just being measured by a number. So I think we're almost wired to think that, we have to be bigger and better and whatever. And that's that competitive mode. But I think how we support women is just realizing that there is enough to go around, and that, life is an interesting journey. It can be challenging. It can be heartbreaking. And, and you meet people like yourself, you meet wonderful people in the podcast world and the internet world who can be sometimes your biggest supporters. And it's hard. And I think the other way to look at it too is, as we get older, it's harder to make friends. I talked about this on my show, that it's not easy. I mean, you've moved not too long ago. And, when you're starting all over, if you're starting in a new job, if you've been a stay-at-home mom, you're going back to work, you're seeing your environment is changing. But, I don't know how many people would turn down making a new friend. So I think when it comes to just supporting other women is, hey, that could be your new best friend. That could be somebody else in your circle to support you and you to support them. So, but there's enough to go around. It doesn't have to be, whether it's social media, if it's money, if it's whatever it is, there's enough for you and for them. So it doesn't have to be that if somebody else has something and you don't have it yet, that it's gone, or that your opportunity is gone, because it's not. It just might take a little bit more time, but there's still enough for you too. So I think we just have to, kind of take the ego out of it a little bit, and, realize your time will come when it's meant to be. So just kind of hang in there, be patient with yourself, give yourself grace, but, along the way, support what you can. And if it's really triggering, it can be hard to see, especially social media. I mean, we love it, but we hate it. It's such a love-hate relationship, right? But, if you are seeing other women and it's triggering you, you might have to mute them for a little bit but that also should be, that should be something that if you're noticing within yourself that it is bothering you, or if it's triggering you, there's a reason there. That's something you got to work on. So, that might be kind of a reason to say, all right, break out that journal.
Yes.
Why is this bothering me? Right? Like, why does it bother me that so-and-so just got a promotion? Why does it bother me that she just got engaged? Why does it bother me that, her social media following is bigger than mine, or whatever? Right. So it's a good reason to kind of dive deep and go, what's really going on here? So
absolutely.
I think you had another part to that question I might have missed.
Yeah. Introduce yourself in living unapologetically. Talk about your journey to you living unapologetically, because I think that also gives permission for others too. When we see other women in our life doing that, it's like, that looks really freeing. That looks really attractive to me. How do I go about doing that? So I think that can, just by you living unapologetically, can be an invitation, inviting others people into it. But how have you gotten to this point, and what's your journey been like with that?
Yeah, great question. I would say, it's taken me a while to get to the place I am now. I had to do a lot of work, a lot of self-growth, grew up very differently in a very different childhood situation. So it took me, reading a lot of books and, listening to a ton of podcasts, and just really kind of wondering why I was so triggered by things, and why did I feel like there was a chip on my shoulder? Like I felt so irritable, and I kind of thought, why am I like this? I don't want to live this kind of angry, upset life all the time. Like something's going on here. So it took years, but now that I'm here, I'm very glad to be on the other side of things, and I'm still a work in progress. But, that's part of the reason why I did create the podcast, is because I've learned these things. It's taken me some time to get here, but now I want to help others. But, I think when it comes to helping other women too, and just anyone else, it's, some of those things are just, when I'm out and about, if I'm, my fiance says this to me all the time, if we're out to dinner, almost every time he's like, I know you're going to say something about the girls' nails. So every time we have a female server and she, hands us something with a menu, I'm always like, I love your nail color. I love your jewelry, and it's true. I genuinely mean that. Like, if I like your style, or, it's just like, why not pass on something positive? Why not, and it can start with something that's simple, and I love hearing people's stories. I love connecting, I love getting to know people. And I think that just showing genuine interest, and also just being nice to other people, just pass it along, that does have a trickle down effect, and it does snowball. And hopefully, if someone's very receptive to you, there you go, and if they're not, then they're not your people. But at least all you can do is spread the kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it's those little things. You never know what kind of difference that is going to make for someone when you just give them that little compliment, that little plus, especially, if it's been a long, hard, you just don't know what they're going through. And those things matter. Those little things, they matter. You just never know. So thank you for that. So good. I love that. I'm not surprised to hear you do that at all. But yeah, it's powerful, and it makes you feel seen. It makes you feel known. I love that so much. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. Talk to me about that, how it frames what you say yes and no to, boundaries, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about the why, to me, that's kind of your own brand, and it's who you are at your core, and it's what you stand for. It's what you tolerate. It's what you accept. Anything, like one of the phrases I've come that always comes back to me is, we teach people how to treat us. And we teach people how to treat us by what we accept and what we allow. We do that through how people speak to us, or how they treat us. If we keep going back for more after terrible behavior or someone talking down to us, we're teaching them that that's okay and that we're going to keep showing up for that. So I think that it's important to realize whatever it is that you stand for, and figure out what that means and what's important to you, what your why is, but also to make sure your actions match your words. So it's kind of like the boundary thing, it's just, if you say you don't tolerate something, then don't tolerate it. If you say something is important to you, then live that, don't say one thing and act out a different way, and just kind of make sure that the words and the actions match each other. And, if whatever's true to you, whoever you are, living your authentic self, just making sure that you're actually living it. And you're just, anything in your environment also supports that too. You don't want it to just be, just part of your life. You want every category in your life, whether it's your job or your family or your friends or your social life, to support you in whatever it is and whoever you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so true. And this goes back to that consistency thing. And I love what you said about, you're going to teach people how to treat you. We don't realize how much power is in that. Sometimes we'll look at like, gosh, they take advantage of me, or gosh, they never show up for me the way I show up for them, or gosh, they talk to me so disrespectful. You have a choice in that. And how you respond, whether, what you put up with, and what you say yes and no to.
Absolutely.
You do, so I think that's a really good thing to remember as we're thinking about, in terms of my values, is me. Am I one of my values? And in terms of how people treat me and how I want to be received, how I want to be respected. I think that's such an important thing. Thank you so much for that. Living out of your own expectations versus others. If you're living out of your own expectations, you're less likely to be treated in these ways we don't want to be treated, I think, and versus living out of others' expectations, showing up the way they expect you to. Also, when you make a shift in that can be difficult for people.
Absolutely.
So, but if you're feeling an angst within you and you're looking at your life on paper and being like, I shouldn't feel this way, start thinking about whose expectations you're living out of. So talk to me about your expectations journey.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm still on this journey.
Yeah,
I really am still working through this. This is a tough one, especially because I have such high standards for myself. I expect a lot from myself. I expect a lot from the people around me. So sometimes it is really hard to to not get burnt out, to not overwork myself, to not, because I put a lot on my plate, and it's hard because when you look at, expectations, and it's hard because there's a lot of things we feel we have to do. And it's a fine line of figuring out, do I have to do that? Am I supposed to do that? Especially like I think about work, and career, and it's hard to kind of find the balance of, well, I'm doing what's expected of me in my position, but also, does that align with who I am? And where do I draw the line and kind of build in that like work-life balance, let's say, and when can I say no? And I've had that happen personally. I mean, I had a previous manager who was expecting a lot of me, and there really wasn't, I was happy to do it for a long time, but after a couple of years of just constantly being the go-to person, I finally said, you know what, I'm going to step back from doing that, because it was kind of, the responsibility was there, but the compensation wasn't there. So I finally said, you know what, I have to stop showing up for this. Like, again, my actions and my words had to match each other. And the manager I had at the time said, was not happy with how, with that. I was basically putting the boundary in place, and the manager was not happy, and, reacted in a way I did not expect. And it really kind of shocked me. And then I kind of felt, did I just, commit career suicide here? Did I just really shoot myself in the foot? So it kind of put me in a position where, for the time being, I kind of dealt with it a little bit longer, but eventually I was working on my exit strategy, because I realized that didn't align with who I was. But it's hard, because, people will take from you as long as you allow that, there's, and I also believe too, when it comes to, relationships, some people will overperform and underperform, and if you're constantly overperforming all the time, well, that almost becomes your new norm. And that can be seen in friendships. It can be seen in work relationships. But if you're constantly overperforming, people are expecting that of you all the time. Yeah. So, and it can be hard when you just want to go from going 100 miles an hour back down to maybe 60. Maybe your normal speed is 60. You want to get right back to where you were. But if they're, used to you at 100, it's hard to kind of say, well, actually, that's not my norm, but you're expecting a lot of yourself. So it hasn't been easy. It's definitely one of those things where I do try to realize that it's not up to me to have someone else be okay with my decisions. Like, that's on them. So if I make, if I make a decision about something, it's not my responsibility how they feel about what I've decided to do. Yeah. It's up to them. They have to get to that conclusion on their own. And that sometimes is hard. That can be hard for me, because,
I'm shaking my head vigorously because I am so with her on this. Yes.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where you just, you'd like for them. Like, I've always heard the saying that, two people can experience the same situation, but see it from two different lenses.
So true.
Right? Experience the same scenario, but have two experiences from it. And, and it's incredible, because it's true. So sometimes we do put the boundary in place, or we do say no, or we do whatever. And then the other people react differently. They expect this or expect that. And it is hard, because it's, you don't want to kind of interfere with the decision you've made. But at the same time, it's not my responsibility to expedite the process on the other end. That's on them. So that can be really, really hard for me.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yes, to be patient and to not give in to that when it's the best thing for you. But if you have been in a pattern of a different behavior, or a codependency of some type, or any kind of people pleasing, or just working at a really 1,000% level, and you're like, this isn't good for my health, I got to come down to just basic 100%.
Exactly.
Where I can actually, and you relay that to someone, that's an adjustment period. Or even just if you're changing the way you show up in a relationship, or just what you can and can't do, event wise, or even just, when it comes to family, all these different things. I mean, you're in a new family dynamic with, a fiance and stepchildren. So there's different kinds of things that you can say yes and no to now, and getting used to new boundaries within those relationships. All that's very complex, but you have to go back to that. And your body, how does this feel for me? And what, where is my health lie in this? I'm talking about my whole health. And if I go back on that, what does that do to me? It just makes it harder down the road, because if you're going to try to make the shift again, because it's going to continue to feel bad. They're not going to respond any differently. They might respond worse, most likely, unless you're really fortunate, but not letting that response be something you can control. Like, I will whack myself out of complete norms to try to communicate something in a way to get the response I want. And
Yes.
a lot of that time I will over explain. Like I am the over explaining champion of the world so that I can, my kids and my husband are champions at calling me out on it in a way like, Mom, we don't need more information. You're over explaining now. That's not necessary. We're good. We're good. You don't need to do that because you're trying to facilitate what you're hoping to get out of them. And you can't control that. And you don't need, and you aren't required to do that. If it's good for you and it's what you need and necessary for your well-being, that's all that matters. But that's very hard to break out of and not get sucked into.
It is. And especially, you're saying about over explaining. I found myself so many times just defending my perspective on something because the other person doesn't get it. And I go into the weeds, and I'm in there going, this, that, and I'm like, but how do you not understand? And you're walking them through it for the 22nd time and they're still not getting it. And then I realized even from doing that, I'm thinking I'm exhausted. I've exhausted myself trying to explain, right? And I'm thinking to myself, and they still don't understand. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not my job to, right? But that's where I have to reel it in because otherwise I'm like, this is like, how many times am I going to, listen to myself say the same thing over and over again? And that's something that I catch myself doing it now. Once I kind of go into, that repeat mode, I'm like, oh, nope. And I leave it. That's what I say now. I actually say, you know what? I'm starting to defend myself and I'm good.
Yes.
I'm good. Now I've told you how I feel and you can take it or leave it. Right. And even with my relationship, it's the same thing. Like sometimes we'll see things not eye to eye. And then I go right back into, but hold on, but wait a minute, look at it from this side. And then I go, and then I'm doing all the talking. And then I have to, no, what am I doing? So it's like you just start to notice your own behaviors and you have to kind of put your foot down and say, no, this isn't working. And if you get it, cool. If you don't, it's all right.
And then you have to release it. But I'm the same way. I'll start noting. I was doing that in text this morning. I'm like, that's too much information. I don't need to give her that much information. I just need to answer this basic question. She doesn't need all the background history. This is what it is. This is what, this is the upfront information I don't need. I spent years with some family members doing this very thing. And my own kids told me, and my husband and my own kids are like, Mom, we watched you for years stand on your head, trying to make these things work, trying to get them to see things from your perspective or what was unhealthy, not healthy, wasn't working. And they just don't want to budge. You don't have to knock yourself out anymore. They're either going to decide to do it or they're not, but you don't have to compromise your health and your well-being and and your peace, trying to bring them around to something that just isn't important to them. They don't see, they don't get, and they don't want to. It's not your responsibility to do that. And you got to release that. And it's not fair to them to impose something on them that they're not ready to receive. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but it's so easy to do, and
we can talk about it, but it's hard. Yeah.
It's so hard. But if you find yourself being so exhausted after those conversations, then you're doing it, and that's where you conserve your energy. Just go into preservation mode and just stop it right there. You've said it once. Yes. That's all you need to do. And you just leave it there. But it's hard. No, it's hard to do. It is hard. It is hard. And listen to your body too. Like when I was going into these situations, my body would seize up every time. Seize up and would stay seized up without a lot of self-care while I was in those scenarios for the, 2 to 4 days I was in those situations with those people. And then I would leave that space and my body would relax. And this went on for 20 years as I would go in and out of these scenario situations, people, and I was like, no more. Yeah. I can't do it anymore. So unhealthy. And it has been difficultly received by many, but I have so much more peace. And it's like, if they decide to come, to meet me on any of these things, we can have a conversation, but I won't sacrifice myself anymore. Exactly. And that's so hard because that's family, or for friendships or whatnot. And it's so hard. Whatever it is. It could be a work relationship that you've been in for years. And maybe you love the work and you love the difference you've made, or you're just scared to leave. But listen to your body and pay attention to how exhausted you are. I had a job situation that I got out of, that I didn't see coming, that I ended up getting out of about a year and a half ago.
And at the time I was like, oh no. And now I'm like, oh, thank God. Because, because I was about a week out. I'm like, I didn't realize how exhausted emotionally I was every day when I got home. I would get home and literally had nothing left for anybody. I was falling asleep on the couch at 6 o'clock in the evening. I mean, it was all, it was like, now I'm at the other end where I can't go to sleep at night because menopause. But, but all that to say, pay attention to those things. Listen to those things. They are telling you what you need to do. Is just being able to follow through, but also give yourself grace because you've spent years. It can take time to undo those practices as well.
And you talk a lot about that on your show too, about listening to your body, because your body is going to tell you everything. It's kind of like listening to your intuition. Just your body will physically react a certain way. Your mind will, if you're getting headaches, if you're physically exhausted, whatever it is, listen to your body. It's such a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Lots there. We could talk about that forever. Obviously I could work. Thank you for that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. This feeds nicely into that. We've talked about these scenarios where we've had to release and know we're doing the best we can and not be responsible for someone else. But there's also years of maybe being engaged in relationships or habits or practices or work that we wish we hadn't. But, at the same time, I think accepting that I did the best I could at the time with the tools I had. But that can be really difficult too. So talk to me about your layers journey.
Yeah, that's such a great, and you know what, layers are what make us all up. I think about an onion and you peel back each layer and, there's some good layers in there and there's some maybe that are getting a little moldy or, that aren't so good that we wish we could just take out. But, each layer has made us into who we are, and I mentioned having that kind of chip on my shoulder, and that's why I turned to journaling and, that's a layer, there's a layer in there of, of showing up not as my best self or, wondering why I was so irritable and, whatever. And I think now having those layers does kind of force you to, again, you realize who you want to be. You get to choose what your output is. You get to choose how you handle things and again, how you want to live your life. So for me, I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to, find more positive. I wanted to, work through my triggers, all those types of things. So when it comes to all the layers, I think that I'm very empathetic to others because I see a lot of myself in other people because I've been through similar experiences. So I think it's very connecting with other people. And I think that, but I can also notice, and this is something you and I talked about on my show, but sometimes it is hard when you do put in that work and you are around people who haven't yet put in that work. So you are maybe steps ahead in your own self-growth journey, but you might recognize in someone else, again, certain things that you might have gotten through yourself on those layers, but they haven't done that work yet. And that's hard, because you're trying to move forward. Maybe you're taking 10 steps forward and you don't want to take 11 back. You don't want to take too many steps back to pull these people forward. Because again, that's their own journey and they have to do that when they're ready and at their own pace when they're processing, but it is hard. But I do think it does help. It helps us be empathetic. It helps me be empathetic to understand people, to connect with people because we are humans, and again, I mentioned social media. Social media is very highly filtered, edited content, and I talk about that a lot. Yeah. And it's what we see. We think that's real life and it's not, real life is the layers. Real life contains the bad and the good and the hard stuff and the stuff we wish didn't happen to us. But that's the real life, that's the unedited version. And so, and I think sometimes we forget that, but I think the hardest part for me is the whole, having done the work and, because again, I started my journey years ago with this work. This has been on many, many years of work. So, and I'm glad to be here, but, and for everybody else, it might take many years, maybe it won't, but it's going to take some time. So it is hard to, kind of have that patience as you're waiting for other people maybe to do their own thing, but or hoping that they realize or recognize that they have to do that work too. So, but I think it definitely helps you connect and understand people and that we all have a journey and it's not always pretty, no. But we're all here and we can choose what we want moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important, that empathy piece. And because I think sometimes we'll see oh, okay, stop for a minute before I rush to judgment here. That's where I was 5 years ago or 2 months ago or 10 years, whatever it was. And, and it doesn't, that humanity piece and just remembering that, I think is definitely that too. And just giving ourselves grace and
absolutely.
And nuance and allowing ourselves to feel all these things and know that layers it's a growth process and being open to growth. I think to embrace your layers, you've got to be open to continual growth. You cannot get this idea in your head that you're going to arrive and you're just going to arrive and be there and that's where you'll be and everything will be great. That's not how life works. And so being open to that piece as well, to continue to grow, learn, evolve. I make very different decisions than I did 10 years ago in terms
absolutely
of the people I surround myself, the things that I care about, the things that I'm active in, the things that I fight for, the faith spaces I'm not in and am in anymore, how I vote, so many things have evolved and changed. That's fine. That's good. That's not a bad thing. And I think just being open to whatever that looks like for you. And realizing that you're just going to continue to add more and peel back and some new things will expose themselves. Yeah.
Who you are today is not who you're going to be 5 years from now. Like, hopefully you just keep getting better. Like a fine wine, right? You just age, you just age well. Like, that's what we are. We're just every, couple of years, we're just improving and leveling up. So it's all good.
And if you are in the same place, take a look at that. Because it's all, we can get comfortable. We can get kind of stale in our process of growth and evolving and learning. And so don't let comfort or fear of the unknown, get in your way either. I think that's a clue as well.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to do the work. Don't be afraid to put the work in on yourself. I think a lot of times we brush those things under the carpet, put it right under the rug. We don't want to deal with it. We know it's there, but we don't want to deal with it. Work through it. It's going to take some time. It's going to open up some wounds, but when you get to the other side, it's going to be much better.
Yeah. We don't want to sit in the discomfort, but let me tell you, it's worth it. And the freedom that you gain and the weight that comes off metaphorically and just, you can feel it in your body. In summary, living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers. Talk to me about how that's affected your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others.
I would say, I think kind of to your point that it's really about, I'm proud of the work I've put in to be where I am today. I look forward to more growth in the future. I'm excited for, sometimes I think, wow, what else is there really to learn? I feel like I've learned it all, but there really is a lot more. And I'm just touching the surface. So, I'm excited for whatever's to come and, even for the people around me, to see that too. And I hope that I can just hopefully positively make an impact on people around me, whether it's friends or family or, my listeners. But I look forward to what that is because I love to learn and I love to, I still, like I said, I still have my triggers. I still have my things that I'm working on. So I'm just excited for, to keep working on that and peeling back that onion and just, again, with the journaling pattern, looking at the pattern popping, what's sticking out? There's still stuff in there that needs attention and needs TLC. Yeah. So I look forward to kind of working through that. And then my relationships are going to get better because I'm going to show up better. I'm going to be that much more improved and a better version of me. So, my friendships are going to be more solid or, I'll attract new friends or my relationship's going to get stronger. My colleagues at work, we're going to have a better working relationship because of that. So it's only positive that comes out of this. So I just look forward to kind of continuing on that journey and just keep getting better.
We're down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Yeah, such a great question. I had to write these down because I really did think about this. So my first one is journaling, which you've already heard me talk a lot about. I love it. I'm so passionate about it. Number 2, I said I also was an extroverted introvert. So I love being alone because I need that time to recharge. The third one is good sleep. Good sleep is huge. Number 4 is good music. It could just be light jazz music as I'm working, which I'm a big fan of jazz now. Could be a podcast, but it could also just be, some, I'm 40 years old and I grew up on, Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac. I like the old school hip hop and R&B, like maybe that's what you need, whatever music like feeds your soul. That's what you need sometimes. And the last one for me is good conversation, because I really feel like when I have just made a connection with somebody like you and I today and just have like such a good conversation, it's not draining. It's energizing. And I think you actually share this on my show, but you just feel connected and validated and seen. And, there's nothing like, sitting down over a cup of coffee with a friend or whomever and having a good conversation, or a glass of wine, or sitting at dinner with your partner and just, feeling connected to somebody. Like it's everything. So
it is.
That's
so invigorating. It's so invigorating. And you can tell the difference when you come out of a conversation like that. You feel differently. You feel energized. It's not taxing. It's not exhausting. It's energizing. It's invigorating. And your body will tell you, you'll know. I love that. So good. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
That's a good question. I think I just want to not feel depleted. And I want to feel more recharged. I want to find better balance. That's more work-life balance. I travel a lot for my job, so sometimes that can take a lot out of me. I think that might be 3. And I think I just want to enjoy the moment a little bit more. And because sometimes I'm always looking ahead and looking at the calendar and just so focused on the future that I sometimes forget about enjoying this right here. Yeah. And the last one, just to have a good year, just to choose, things that are going to work, whether it's choosing a better outlook, a different perspective, choosing to find the positive, just making a good choice that makes you enjoy the experience a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Really good. Oh, so good. All right. Well, I'm going to have Lexy share in a minute, but don't worry. If you're not in a place, you can write this down, as you know, or if you're new to us, you may not know, but you can go to embracinglayers.com, go to our resources page, and find all the resources that Lexy and I have talked about today that she's going to share with you, that she has for you. So don't worry if you can't write this down, but Lexy, share a little bit about where we can find all that you've talked about today with Piece of Me podcast, with your journaling, all those things.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for anyone who's listening, the easiest way to find the podcast, of course, it's available on every platform, but it's Piece of Me Podcast. There is a website, which is pieceofmepodcast.com, and Peace is spelled P-E-A-C-E. So Piece of Me Podcast, and all the social links is everything is Piece of Me Podcast. So Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, it's Piece of Me Podcast. And also I did mention the journaling. So if you go to my website, pieceofmepodcast.com, there is a link there to bring you to Amazon, because I do have a journal that I did hand design, and it kind of balances some freelance writing with some wellness exercises to help you prioritize yourself. And you can get that right on the website. So pieceofmepodcast.com. So thank you so very much.
Ooh, I like that. That journal, that's a great gift for yourself or for a friend. So think about that too. That's a really great thing that I know people always appreciate, but treat yourself to that too. I love that so much. And podcast is great. She's got great guests. Take some time to listen to that. And again, I love all these resources we offer, because different things hit differently with different people. At the end of the day, we want to invite women into these communities and have these conversations, and know that we that are podcasting on different podcasts, we're having them too together to create even bigger communities. So thank you, Lexy. I'm so glad that you and I are part of each other's communities. I'm so glad that we get to share. You're a blessing in my life, and I'm so thankful for you. Thanks for sharing the time today. And, audience, I would just say this week, sit down, write those things down. Do you have some dreams? Do you have some unprocessed feelings? Do you just need a place to kind of unload your day and to create some peace in your mind so you can sleep better at night? Whatever it is, it's a great practice. I sometimes do verbal journaling. I'm a verbal processor. So I will read, if I'm really feeling amped up, like I need to get it out verbally after I've written some things down, or it feels too overwhelming, try verbally processing as well. I record it, I delete it later. Usually, sometimes I save it if I want to go back to it, but that's another thing that I found really helpful too. But a lot of power in doing this and in the help it provides. So thanks for sharing that today. Thanks for being here with me today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for, letting me talk with your listeners. And what a great podcast you have. So thank you for all that you do, because you have created such a community to support women and help us all along this journey we call life. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. All right. EmbracingLayers.com for more information.